Hey, welcome to the What the Tech podcast, your source for all things tech. Today, we'll actually be joined with one of the most successful serial entrepreneurs and digital transformation experts in the industry, Bobby Srivastav. Get ready to hear her amazing story and learn about how she kicked off her career as a technology innovator. Let's get right into it. So I'm here with my new friend, Bobby, who is an award-winning serial entrepreneur, author, advisor, speaker, technology innovator, and digital transformation expert. And today she's actually going to share her founder story with us and how she's helping to modernize legacy processes through digital disruption, re-engineering, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Thanks for coming on today with me, Bobby.
Thank you, Troy. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, you're a little bit of a local legend here, so I'm excited to have this conversation. I pay attention, especially when I reach out to somebody and say, I want you on my show. I go ahead and I look at all the things that you're doing in the community. I look at all the people that are interacting with you, and you've got a pretty good following, so I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's fun to talk to local folks that are at least in like-minded industries.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a little bit of melding across a lot of different things. So hopefully I'll be able to keep up with you with what you're sharing with me today. But either way, excited to hear about some of the innovative ideas that you're bringing to a legacy industry and so forth. But before I do that, Bobby, I actually want to ask you a quick icebreaker, a little get to know you if you don't mind.
Go for it. Yeah.
All right, great. So if your friends that know you best were to say that you had a superpower, what would they say it was?
I think they would say that I'm like a multitasker galore. Uh, this week was it was interesting week. Quick story. So I put my daughter in camp this week, but it's 30 minutes away. I live in Winston-Salem, so it's in High Point, and I'm taking calls while I'm driving her, get her situated, get the work done. And one of my colleagues was like, why didn't you just take time off? I said, we've got enough work to do. Like, I'm working at the 19th hole when there's kids coming around. You just have to make it work. But it's all about multitasking, right? It's getting the job done in the most creative way and with the time that you have.
Yeah, time poverty is a real thing, especially when you're the top person within a growing firm like yours. So I'm excited to hear more about that and your story. So let's kick it off with this. So tell us a little bit about your background. Kind of where did you start, and how did that get you all the way to where we're at today? And then once you do that, share a little bit of where you're at today and what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely, Troy. So I've been in technology most of my career. So after undergrad, I went to school at App State. That's where I did my undergrad, and really enjoyed the technology side of the house. And and I worked at organizations like Aon, at PepsiCo, at a division of AIG. And then I had a life event, and I was at the Center for Creative Leadership when I had my life event, which is the birth of Savannah in 2015. And a couple of things happened. First is, as a new mom, you have to balance, once again, multitask galore. You have to balance a lot of you've got a baby, and then you've got to have you're doing all this paperwork process. And that was felt across me and my husband. So we decided to build my first tech startup, which was called Docsmore, to digitize documents. And that was like, how do you get rid of this paper-driven process? So when I was on disability leave, because as part of our maternity leave policy, it was disability, right? Like that's how you cover your maternity leave. And I remember I thought, Troy, and you're in this space, so you will understand this. I was basically like called my HR and said, "Yep, just had a baby. You want to see a picture? Do I need to do anything else?" And they're like, "Congratulations, have you filed the paperwork?" And I was like, "What paperwork?" So they emailed me this document, and when I looked at the document, I called a 1-800 number to the carrier and said, how is the best way for me to send this to you? I've got this form. Do you have a digital option? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, can I email it to you? I know I can. I'm a technology person. I'm like, I can figure this out. I can just send you an email. We don't accept email. I was like, what do you accept? Mail and fax. And I had a baby. So I literally took Savannah and FedEx or Kinko's a fax document, because one thing I know about mail, it's gonna get lost. It's a long cycle. Fax is at least real time, right? And
Right.
I remember carrying Savannah. Here's my disability paperwork. And that's when I recognized that everything as a new mom that I had to deal with docs is all paper driven. And it was like you just get inundated with so much paperwork. So that was my first realization. The second realization is more personal. So when you are a new parent, and this is very unfortunate, things just change in the organization. They just look at you differently. And I was like, you know what? If I can continue to do this with my career growth, because if I'm a mom, that doesn't mean I'm not career oriented. It's just I have to balance, right? I have to
Mhm.
multitask, work life integration it out. But that shouldn't impede my progress, right? That doesn't make me less of a performer. I have a life event, and that should be celebrated, not penalized. And I think and that was my realization, that if I wanted to do anything, I have to do it myself. Like, let's not be dependent on it. Like, I have to create my own path. And I think those were the two catalysts into going into entrepreneurship back in 2015. Docsmore was the catalyst of my second company, which is now Benekiva. And Benekiva was we worked with a gentleman that talked about an insurance use case. He's a non-tech founder, really wanted to innovate on the beneficiary side of the house. And we felt like, what a great use case for the work that we already know from a Docsmore perspective. There's in claims process. I lived through a claim process. It's heavy paper-based process. So if we can create a digitization and do much more bigger vision collectively, let's do it. So it gave us that really good use case to move into what I'm currently focused on right now, which is Benekiva. So Docsmore, we had to put that on the side, but we really had to focus on Benekiva. And then I tell Troy that I went startup crazy. I had a baby. I had like 3 companies at one time. But I think those are scars that you learn, lessons of experience. But now it's really growing Benekiva and serving that mission of claims and making that easier for our industry.
Absolutely. And it's a painful process.
It's a very painful process. And I lived through the disability side. I mean, I was just having dinner with one of my friends yesterday, and she talked about how she's an executor of her estate, and it took her 1 year to close out all of the loops. And she was telling me about her day, Troy. She was saying how she would carve out 9 a.m. to 12 to deal nothing but with insurance carriers on claims. She had this Excel spreadsheet. She's super type A. So I was like, okay, I like her because she thinks like me, but not everybody does that. And when you're going through a grief process, you've got to have a process that's simple. You're getting status updates. And that were the stories that we heard from Brent, who's my business partner, from the other individuals we talked to in our journey. And that was really truly the catalyst and the promise that we're delivering in the insurance industry is, how do we make claims less painful and actually a moment of joy because your carrier's fulfilling that promise versus a moment of pain. Like, you don't need more pain when you're going through these processes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you mentioned a life event. Uh, a lot of times, a life event can be a happy moment, and sometimes it can be a not so happy moment, right? But either way, there's other things typically on your mind other than fill out this form, fax it, email it, whatever, right? And so by streamlining those things in a meaningful way, I think you're doing the whole world a great service by figuring that out. So I am curious, from your perspective, what have been some of the challenges in starting both your first business and this business? What have been some of the biggest challenges?
I think we say it best in our organization. It's we have a pretty big mission with Benekiva is we want to be a single claims platform, irregardless of the product line. So our focus has been life, annuity, disability types of lines, and then we want to move to different areas, and and I think our biggest challenge is like belief that we could do this. Like, we're on a mission to prove to the industry that we can do this. And then I would say the second piece is we live with it's change management, right? And it's a lot of people take change management and they apply it to a lot of the problems we talk about in the industry, whether that's legacy systems, bad processes, regulations being changed. Those are those are real, but if you think about it, it's all part of this change management, this process you have to go through in order to create the change. You can't replicate a bad process in a new technology. If you do that, you're creating more legacy tech. You can't substitute legacy piece of technology with a newer technology that may be built on legacy principles, legacy philosophy. So there's a lot of labeling that I think if we were to really think about this as a change management activity versus I'm going to just throw AI on this. No, AI is not going to solve your problem. You've got to really look at the foundational and core of what you're trying to solve. And the core is we've got to make some changes. Technology is an enabler. Process is what's going to help you drive that. But good process with good tech is going to create that foundational. And then you can add on what I call squirrel brain in our industry, like the Chat GPTs of the world, the other areas that really truly drive, but you can't start like right here, right? Like, you've got to fix your core.
Right. Why do you feel the insurance industry is potentially primed to do this now? Because I personally have experienced that the insurance industry moves much slower than many other industries I've worked in. So what do you feel is like now's the time? And maybe maybe it's a challenge that you're running into, trying to convince people that paper is no longer a necessity, that you can change things. I like the way that your perspective is really about change management and focusing on the process. The process is broken. Once we have a better process, we can implement technology, which will streamline the process, right? But why do you think maybe the insurance industry is ready now?
There's a few macro trends that are happening, Troy, right now. So if you think about the whole COVID, what COVID really taught us, even now, we're like through, now it's like 2-3 years outside of that. But the Great Resignation, you now have a brand new, a new workforce. How much onboarding are you going to do to teach them on the claims process? Are you really are you going to be able to attract the talent that you want in an industry like insurance if you don't fix your change management issues with newer, enabling technology, good process? Because think about this: if I'm a newly graduate who's beaming with opportunity to go make an impact, and if you stick me in front of a legacy piece of technology with a process that doesn't even make sense, there's 20 steps that I have to take to do one simple task. How long will that resource stay? if your onboarding time frame isn't I'm going to spend 12 weeks because I've got to teach them on how to use this piece of technology. Forget about the insurance lingo. So we're having that macro trend. Like, we have to keep up with the hybrid workforce. We've got to keep up with the newer generation of workforce. So that is a catalyst, right? That's one of the catalysts. The second piece is customers are changing. So there is no longer a perception that if I am doing a claim and if I'm in my 50s or 60s or 70s, I'm going to be wanting paper. That's not a good assumption that you can make in the marketplace, because everybody has Amazon and everybody has Netflix. They want those types of experiences. So if insurance doesn't change, you've got these new entrants that are coming into the marketplace that are proving that I could buy insurance pretty quickly. I could do a claim pretty quickly. Yes, you may have a ton of assets, right, under management, but you can't just sit, you can't sit stagnant. You have to make change. And that's when we go to conferences and talk to different leaders in the organization. They're understanding these macro trends of resourcing, of customer behavior. And the third piece is the technology that we have right now, the pace of technology innovation. And when it comes into the marketplace, think about ChatGPT and how quick the adoption was compared to the other technology trends that we've been seeing in the marketplace. Now it's no longer a cycle of this maturity of product development that we used to see as early adopter, there's a maturation. It's that those cycles are happening pretty quickly. And a lot of this technology is opening up eyes to organizations of doing things better, faster. So if you are not at a position from a core perspective to really think through those items, you're going to be left behind. Do you want to be the Kodak? Is what my question would be, right? You don't want to be a Kodak. You don't want to be the Blockbuster.
Blockbuster, yeah.
Yeah, you've got and those things will happen if you don't adopt the changes that are happening at the macro level.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the delve into the kind of industry. I am curious, what kind of impact do you feel Benekiva can actually make on the industry? Say you got some early adopters, or you got everybody to say, I'm in. What kind of time savings, what kind of impact would that have, both on the customer experience, but also on their financial statement, if they were able to get those processes streamlined and to leverage a technology that does that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Troy. So when we work with with companies that are looking and evaluating our technology from a ROI perspective, we talk to them about several metrics. One is your net promoter score. Digital, that's a given, right? The next piece is this is one of my favorites. It's the ability to get the job done, which, if you think about it, it's efficiency. We're proving to be anywhere from, we're getting quoted from 40% all the way to 75% efficient in terms of the total process time. We're reducing cycle time. So my friend that was talking about her story about this 9 to 12 scenario, we're reducing that cycle time by 75%. For a lot of carriers. So what a process could take 30 days could be drastically reduced. We're also seeing NIGO rates, which in our industry, it's an acronym for not in good order, which creates a lot of this rework, this friction point, and we're eliminating that to less than 5% from an industry perspective when it comes to claims process. And I would say one of my favorites metrics that I've been recently tracking with our customers is the amount of interest and penalties are you paying because you're not doing the right process. Your claim process is so long that you have to pay this state interest rates, and we're drastically reducing those, and every carrier is different, but those numbers are in thousands to millions of savings. So those are some of the metrics that gets us, like when we think about impact, that's what gets us excited about not only are we doing the right thing for the company, we're making the staff experience really good. We're taking care of the customers, but financially, is this a good return on investment? And I'm only talking about it from an operations lens. Our mission is to do more, is to take a look at the claim process and how do we turn that into, look at it from a revenue perspective. So don't look at operations at this piece of the process as I'm going to only spend. It's going to make it efficient. Yes, I'm going to make savings, but look at it from a business model perspective. Do you have an opportunity to take a life claim and turn that into a new business process? If you give them a clean process and a nice workflow, you are giving that beneficiary an opportunity, A, to create a good branding, and B, with good workflow and good data orchestration that our platform provides. Why not ask them, do you want portion of your proceeds into a new product? What is stopping our industry? It's never been done. How could we be the catalyst for that?
I'm curious because it really does sound like you're going to disrupt something that needs to be disrupted. But I'm curious, where else can you apply the same philosophy and kind of process management through technology in your mind in the area of insurance? Like what do you have anything else kind of on your roadmap once you solve this? Because I know that you got to stay focused on one thing at a time. What's next on your hit list?
So the next that has been on our hit list is, outside of claims, it's your customer service types of operations. So Troy, like when you want to make a loan request on your policy or a beneficiary change, if you see it now, it's like, I'm going to give you a form, fill it out. Your advisor is calling you because they have a duty to get that into the mothership. And how do we facilitate those processes? So that's one area that we're moving into. We've got several carriers that are using our platform outside of claims into automating those processes, which is a natural fit. The second piece is, we've built this offering called Portal 360, which is really enabling any stakeholder in the claims process. So let's talk, we covered the beneficiary, but what about agents? 50% of most claims that are getting filed, if you have an agency pool, are coming through your agents. So if you give them the same process right now as your bennies, they're not happy agents because they're sitting 3 hours trying to get status. So how do we build a user journey for an agent to simplify so that they could serve the family, in hopes of, I'm gonna retain that business. I'm gonna be that concierge. So it's enabling technology to do those use cases. And third, Troy, is the same principles that we're applying in the individual markets lines. What's the possibility in the group side when you have an employer, kind of like my use case in disability, employer, employee with the carrier in the loop, and how do we really help enable that claims process and communication for all parties involved so it's seamless?
Yeah, there's 5 generations in the workforce, and communication is something that I harp on all the time. I feel like it's the one thing that is missing with most, let's just say, employee benefit programs. There's always components missing. It's like, hey, we do email really good, we do our onboardings really good. We're missing SMS. We're missing a dashboard for our employees to go in and access everything, like one single point of access for them to kind of, whether it could be managing their FMLA, it could be managing something with their disability, it could be like those sorts of things. So I assume that your platform, you're looking at, if you haven't already, ways for APIs to connect to things and, again, create kind of a systematic approach with those things. Would you just talk about how important that is, kind of the idea of having simplified, whether it's communication or simplified access? Because you could have a million different solutions doing a million different things, but if it isn't simplified and centralized, I feel like you're missing the point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a big believer, Troy, also of ecosystems. You as one company can't solve everything because you're then, like our value prop is, we built this platform with workflow, good workflow, but we don't do predictive analytics. I have a partner for that. We don't do fraud detection as an example. We have a partner for that. So it's all about connecting the dots, Troy, to your point. And the reason why that's important is oftentimes we see in our industry, especially let's pick on a fraud tool. A fraud tool will come into the market and say, I could help you reduce your fraud, but in order for you to do that, I need this data. This data is already consumed in other applications. And then if you want to see that fraud data, log into my dashboard and see that information. Log into my system. How many systems will a user have to log in to see this piece of information, this piece of information? If it's all connected, just this is where the employee experience, how many different, why did I, in my world, why couldn't I have gone to my central HR platform, click here, that took me to an experience where I could have easily done my disability process, received my correspondence, saw my benefit calculation, so I'm not guessing or working with my HR who's thinking, oh, I think this is what you're going to get paid. Oh, by the way, you may want to do a HIPAA form. You got to do all of this extra process. But from an employee, I'm using as an employee perspective, like this is where simple tech connected with integrations could have easily solved my pain point, right?
Yep.
And a notification, right, to say, hey, you're about to go on leave because my HR knows that. Here's the steps you need to take. Those are things that are possible. We have to paint that picture, and that's what we're trying to do from a platform perspective. Is how do we take that use case that's all about a claim, and how do we connect the dots with great partners so that we can be that seamless engine that drives that customer experience and customer behavior.
Yeah, because single source usually isn't best in class, but working with the system integrations, as you mentioned before, is imperative so that you can both have best in class and system integration working behind the scenes. Whether sometimes the tech is never seen by the end user, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's never seen at all because it works so seamlessly within another system through those integrations. But I would argue making things as simple as you possibly can with wizards and so forth, and it can actually improve, like you mentioned, brand. Right, if my experience is really good with ABC Carrier, with my claim, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember that. And I'm going to remember that. I'm probably going to mention that to my employer. I'm going to mention it probably to my agent or whoever, needs to hear that information. And it only reinforces that, you're either working with the right or the wrong carrier. And I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Like it's from a system perspective, from me perspective, it should be all connected. I don't really care if, like I'm looking at it from me as a user, you know, it should be just simple, right? Like I could click here, boom, get it done, getting an alert where I'm going to be at to probe me to go click, right? Like that's simple. And I think, Troy, one more thing is in our industry, we sometimes think this picture that we're talking about is going to be gazillions, right? And there's vendors out there that are like, oh yeah, we could do it. This is your 7-figure bill, right? That's the pieces that or 8 figures in some scenarios. It's like it doesn't have to be that laborious process, because remember, pace of technology changes at a rapid pace. It should be done in small time frame, but if you've got the right technology, you could you could experiment and start to connect those relatively quickly. You don't have to wait for a 2-year implementation and go through this, I'm gonna, never do this implementation ever in my life moment to get the tech and then come back and realize it's old.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of those, that's the nice thing about the nimble small tech is that you're solving a very specific issue. And as long as there's the integration that
Yeah.
you can connect the 2 points, right? That's really important. There's a furniture, well, they're not a manufacturer. They're a large furniture distributor here. They're probably the one that you would recognize. And I'm not going to name names, but they implemented an ERP system that was supposed to do all these things. But again, so much custom code was being written, behind the scenes, and now it's basically unusable. And it's going to be unusable for the next couple of years until they fix it. When really what you're trying to do is you're trying to have the right partner solve a very specific issue and then have the connectivity. And so I think that's amazing on your side of things, because that's exactly what you're trying to do. And that's going to create a much better experience for both the employee or the claimant, right? And the employer, or the agent, or kind of connecting all those pieces. So I love that. Now, I did want to ask, because I feel like this is important for anybody who's kind of been in your shoes before, and I want to take a little bit of a shift for the last few minutes we have together. So question, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Because you saw a problem, you grabbed it by the horns, and you ran after it. And the first one wasn't the long-term one, but you went ahead and got after that one. And this has kind of evolved into what you're doing today, because it's really a deviation from what you were working on before. You said, oh, there's a problem with these documents, right? Nobody wants to do this. Like, how do we solve this? And that led you to where you're at today. But what advice would you give to somebody who has that idea and really doesn't know where to start?
I would say, Troy, start. That's the first action. Get up and actually get started. And now we actually have no excuses, because if you look at local ecosystems, I live in Winston-Salem, fairly small town. Winston Starts, Flywheel, Center for Creative Economies. There's accelerator programs galore that doesn't cost money to an entrepreneur, but there are resources that are available for if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, just to get involved. They have weekly to monthly meetings at a minimum. And it's a great way to network with like-minded individuals. That's how I got started. I remember, Troy, it was like in 2015, had a baby, and then we had this idea. We worked on this tech, and I remember going to an event, and there was this guy that was presenting, because he had just created this co-working space in Winston-Salem. And then a few months later, because I had a baby, before baby and after baby, and I saw him in the parking lot, I just ran and grabbed him and said, I have a startup. How do I get involved? And now we don't have to do that, right? Like, it's now those resources, you can just go online and search, and you're going to get probably inundated and overwhelmed with all of this startup activity. So for me, like, the best advice I give people is start, and then talk to entrepreneurs, and try to talk to entrepreneurs that are within your industry and outside your industry. You're going to get two different perspectives, and people that are just starting and people that have achieved. There's good in talking to mentors, but talk to mentors that have actually been in your shoes and then actually have started a company, right? There's a lot of mentors that will give you advice as you grow, like marketing help. They're consultants, right? But they may not have the startup experience. Tap them when you're there, but don't tap them to say, oh, do I start this? Do I not start this? Talk to people that have been in those shoes. It'll be my best advice.
Yeah, you got to get around them first, and then you got to talk to them.
Yeah. First is like, okay, I love you, but I'll come to you in a little bit. So
yeah. Well, that's incredible advice, and I want to thank you so much for coming on here and telling your story with us, Bobby. And just so people know how to get in touch with you, find information about you, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably like the best place to find me, is on LinkedIn, Bobby Srivastav. Happy to connect and happy to talk further, especially if you're in insurance and love to talk claims.
Who loves to talk claims?
Crazy people like me do.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on here and just hanging out with me for a few minutes.
Thank you, Troy.
Awesome. Well, thank you to my listeners. Always, it's great to have you here on What the Tech, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.